I have just a couple of quick reminders to go over before we dive into a couple of topics today. I want to remind everyone that we have this office hours weekly from this time slot from 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then we also have time for you to be able to come and go through our development process for both Python and for Java. And so if you're interested in learning more and helping us as we develop both of those languages, feel free to join our development office hours. Those are every other Wednesday from 9 to 9:30, excuse me. And then we also have monthly office hours for APAC. And then in between our office hour sessions, if you do have questions, feel free to post them in GitHub discussions. For Semantic Kernel, we go through and triage those on a regular basis, and we've seen a lot of great questions lately. So with that, I'm going to go into a quick announcement. We have a guest speaker who is joining as well, but I shared out in GitHub discussions a quick form that we're looking to get some feedback on. I'll put the link in chat, but what I'll go ahead and do before we dive into open Q&A is turn it over to Anupam to introduce himself and present out a bit of content that he has today for everyone.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me properly?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Sophia, for giving me the time. Hi, team. I'm the PM on the LLM app deployment, and I wanted to talk about taking your feedback to make sure that we are able to build the product roadmap in a more sophisticated way. So I'm here to just talk about what we are trying to understand from you and how we can partner together to build or influence the roadmap which we are building. So with that, let me just ask quickly one thing. Are you able to see my screen? I just want to make sure.
We can. And I'd love to just give a little bit more context. So we're inviting Anupam from another part of Microsoft. He's in the Azure AI platform team, or what builds the Azure AI Studio. As you can kind of see from his slides, they're trying to figure out, okay, great. You can easily deploy models from Azure AI Studio. You can start building things with things like prompt flow. You can integrate things like Semantic Kernel or LangChain. And they're seeing that all of these things could potentially come together as an app. And so what he's going to walk you through is kind of some of their thoughts and proposals to see how y'all might use it and how y'all might want to see it different. So take it away.
Yep. So yeah, introduction part, I think Matt covered a little bit of it. Yes, I am part of the AI ML platform team. And I'm here to talk about what our current outlook on the deployment or orchestration look like, and then try to understand from you what are the challenges you have faced so far, or any suggestions or idea which can help us to influence the roadmap around the deployment strategy, because what we want to provide a user is a seamless, maybe one-click kind of a deployment strategy or deployment feature for their LLM app. So quickly running through the agenda. So we covered the introduction. I want to continue to talk about how you here can shape or influence the future of the product roadmap I'm going to share. Then talk about our intent on trying to build semantic kernel on MOE or managed online endpoints. Then give a little bit of overview about MOE, managed online endpoints. Although I'm not the PM, but I just for the context of people who are hearing for this term, managed online endpoints, or its previous name as MIR, just touch on that and then talk about some of the key takeaways. So with that, let me go ahead and focus on the big piece here, which is I'm here to talk to you how you can help us to shape the future of our app hosting and deployment product roadmap. The first request I have is, as Sophia was sharing, there is this survey, and it's a very short survey. It probably has around 8 to 9 questions. If you can take few minutes to complete that survey, Our intent of this survey is to understand your responses would help us to understand what are your specific requirements and challenges, and from that we would be able to understand what kind of direction our journey around this app hosting should be taking. The second one is there are questions within the survey which talk about the challenges you or your team has faced while LLM app hosting or deployment. I understand we are talking about app hosting and deployment, but we would encourage if there are any challenges or obstacles which you have encountered during your development and deployment lifecycle, please explain us in detail. There are questions which talk about what kind of Azure services you have used for deployment. So they would talk about, Azure Container Apps, Azure Web Apps, MOE or MIR. And then explain us why you have selected those Azure services. And the third one is an opportunity. With this call, I'm also looking for volunteers or potential partners, which we can closely work as part of the AI platform product team. You can collaborate with us. You have an opportunity here to influence the product roadmap, and you can help us to expand on our current product capabilities. Moving on, for this quick semester, again, it would not go to semester, but one of our current intent is to have the semantic kernel embedded on managed online endpoints. So SK, which is a popular orchestration framework, our idea is that should be also supported on MOE. So now you can quickly deploy your apps which are using semantic kernel on managed online endpoints. So that's what the current focus of work, what we are doing here is. And just to give an idea of what is MOE, as I said, I'm not the PM, but I wanted, if you are hearing managed online endpoint for the first time, it's basically a solution to deploy machine learning model quickly. This MOE or managed online endpoint takes care of any kind of your serving, scaling, and securing and monitoring of your model. So this was specifically built for machine learning models. So it kind of gives you that flexibility and you don't have an overhead of managing. It manages a lot of these capabilities for you. I can share this slide deck after the call. And if you are interested, I have a link around MOE to talk, which talks about in detail what it is and how it's used for real-time inferencing. You can go and follow the link which I've provided in the deck. The next slide just talks about, okay, how managed online endpoints is different with some of the other Azure capabilities. So if you are using Azure container instances or Kubernetes services, Azure Kubernetes services, the biggest difference is that MOE is able to take care of if you have requirement around network security or isolation. We are talking about endpoint deployment concept. So what happens is if you are looking for a safe, staggered rollout, so you can actually mirror traffic and you can do test rollout using MOE because it gives you the option of blue and green deployment. It has the diagnostic and monitoring capabilities, especially for the machine learning models. It provides you the scalability, and it has all the managed services which some of the other solutions do not support. If you need to learn more about how it's different from some of the other Azure services or capability for deployment, again, I have a reference link down below at the end of the slide, which talks about it. Any questions so far? Sorry,
Logan.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when you say
Logan.
it supports semantic kernel, are you on about just Python or across the board C#, Java?
the idea is across the board, because I would show you from a Python perspective, we have actually gone ahead and have a capability using LangChain. But again, when I say semantic kernel, it's across the board. That's what we are looking at this point of time. Yeah.
And this is something we can use today. Is that right?
No, this capability is still under consideration. So
Okay.
it's not there yet. Yeah. Our
Okay, thank you.
intent, as I mentioned, our intent is to work on bringing that capability to you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Perfect.
And then there's a question in chat if you can paste the links that are in the deck. So the reference one that goes through around what are online endpoints and some of the other links. There's just a ask for that too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if there are interest around MOE, I can partner with one of the PMs on my team for this audience. And if it's valuable, we can have a session which is just focused on managed online endpoints and its capability if the interest is around MOE.
No, it's great to hear. Are there other questions to the people have? Feel free to come off of mute if this is brand new, you have questions, or if you've been looking around in these spaces and have clarifying questions too.
I guess you have a bunch of different differences between the two. What would be like the quick pitch of when a user should use managed online endpoints versus ACI or AKS?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about, let's say, whenever we are talking about machine learning models and you're trying to deploy a model, I think MOE is your go-to solution. The reason being it was built with that understanding that, we would be using and we would be deploying machine learning models for inferencing. If that's the use case, then MOE stands better than the others in terms of it provides you inherent capabilities around monitoring, diagnostics. As I mentioned, the blue-green or green-blue kind of a staggered rollout. So those are some of the capabilities which the other solutions do not. But again, there are other shortcomings on MOE. Let's say if you have a web app and you have a web app component and you're trying to deploy that web component along with a machine learning model, MOE does not support deploying both the components together. So you might have to use an Azure function or something else to deploy your static web pages or web components, because MOE at this point of time does not use or does not support, I would say, any kind of web component. Given it was built with the mind that, at that point of time, the understanding was, okay, so you need to deploy quickly a machine learning model for real-time inferencing. So that's the difference, like a quick compare and contrast. And as I said, I'm no expert in MOE. If my intent was, if you're hearing MOE for the first time, my idea was just to give a quick pitch around what MOE is.
Great. And then in chat, there's a question of what ACI is. Matthew, my understanding both is it's Azure Container Instances. Can you just confirm if that's correct for the acronym?
Yep. So Azure Container Instance, that's absolutely correct.
Perfect. And then there's another question in chat. Tristan, do you want to come off mute? I'm happy to read it aloud as well.
Yeah. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, great. Yeah, just wanted to, I mean, if we are not hosting a model anywhere, if we're accessing everything like via Azure OpenAI APIs, for instance, does this still help us somehow? I'm not immediately getting how it does help in that scenario.
No, I mean, again, the intent was just to talk about MOE. It does not mean that you have to use it. Again, the focus is, as I mentioned, that we want to work with you and understand how you are building your LLM apps, what kind of deployment strategies and solution you are using, and what are their challenges. MOE The intent of these two slides here, again, I want to repeat it, is just for people who were hearing this term for the first time, just to give them
Sure.
an idea what MOE is. It does not mean that we want you to use it or something like that. Our intent is to understand how you are building your LLM apps, what kind of Azure services you are using, and what kind of challenges you are facing, because we are trying to resolve a broader problem around app hosting and app deployment, and MOE is just one part of it.
Great, thanks.
Perfect. Okay, let me power through the remaining slides. So, again, just for awareness, we in this build this year in 2024, we launched a new capability which supports LangChain, which is again a very popular orchestration framework. So it is now supporting, if you're building an LLM app using the orchestration framework of LangChain, you can effortlessly deploy that to managed online endpoints for any kind of real-time inference. Again, we have provided a quick start image, which helps you to reduce your deployment time, which you could use it for deployment, for development and testing purpose. If you are trying to build something on an enterprise grade, I would still say that containerization would be a best approach. And again, I would paste the link of what we have released as part of the build. I would send that link in the chat right after the presentation. My last slide is again bringing us back to where we started. I'm really looking for a partnership here with the SK community here. We want you to really take your time in providing us the feedback on the survey, which, Sophia has shared the link in the chat. I would be doing it. It is, again, as I mentioned, 8 to 9 simple question. We are just trying to understand where are you in your LLM app journey, what kind of challenges you are facing when it comes to app hosting and deployment. The second point is, again, there are questions which specifically ask you to explain in detail. And I wish we could have more of a MCQ or pick and choose kind of questions, but we really want to understand what are your pain points. So that's why there are questions which would ask you to provide us detail about your challenges, and that would help us, the whole AI platform product team, to identify your key pain points and prioritize that accordingly. And as part of this survey, we are also welcoming if there are any kind of volunteers and partners who would like to help us in our mission and vision of building a seamless LLM app deployment experience for all our Azure users. And with that, I really thank you, all of you, for taking time in going over this quick presentation. Any thoughts, any questions? Feel free to come off mute or in the chat. I can't monitor the chat, but again, any questions, please feel free to ask.
Well, thank you, Anirban. Oh, Logan.
Just a quick one. I might be getting a bit confused here. So managed online endpoints are just for hosting models, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So it's not, you would never host any semantic kernel code or anything like that, or is it just for model hosting? Okay. Thank you. That's what I just want to confirm.
Well, thank you,
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and I really wanted to have him kind of share kind of what challenges and questions that they have, and give you all an opportunity to fill out this form. I think a lot of the teams and the customers that Azure AI platform typically works with are more of those ML researchers or AI developers. And I wanted to make sure that they also heard from many of you, because you are enterprise app developers who are using more enterprise tools like Azure container instances or Kubernetes, right? And so by having your voice heard, we won't just build tools to make it easy for AI developers to build AI apps. We want to also make it easy for you to build AI apps as well. So please, please, please fill this out. Make sure that there's enough respondents in the enterprise space so that we can make sure your needs are addressed as well.
Absolutely. And if you want to volunteer or partner, I would send as part of the chat, I would paste all the links, the survey links as well, and then my email as well. Please feel free to ping me, and we would love to hear from you. And that's as Matt kind of aptly summarized. We are looking for your feedback to make sure that the problem and the solution we are arriving at works for you and for other customers who are using Azure. So as I said, there are 9 questions. Yep, there are 9 questions. One of them just ask for your email if you want to provide us, but the rest talk about your challenges, your experience, what kind of services you have used while building LLM apps, and then the initial questions just talk about what is your role, where in the journey of LLM app your app is, and how much experience you have developing those LLM powered apps. So with that, I again thank you, the community, and Matt and Sophia for giving me an opportunity to come and present to you, what we are trying to do here.
Great. Thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it. With that, we'll go ahead and shift into just open Q&A. Also, after the session, post a couple of blogs. There's one in particular around our collaboration with Aspire and Semantic Kernel. And within the survey, we are looking for participants if you want to dive in deeper. So I'll add the link to that. But in the meantime, I'd like to go ahead and open it up to any other questions. Does anyone want to come off of mute or put anything in chat as well? Rigoberto.
I had a quick question about SK versions of the Microsoft Semantic Kernel plugin. If you were using, let's say, version 1.5, just as an example, it's like not too old, but a bit behind the current version in an enterprise solution, how quickly do you think it needs to be updated? Like even the exact example of 1.5, would you call that old today? Or what would you be worried about, given that it's already past 1.0? If you could just opine on that.
Yeah, so now I guess now that we're at V1, there aren't really breaking changes moving forward. I will probably use this opportunity to share kind of one breaking change that we suspect may happen in the future. But there isn't a big push for you to move to a latest version unless there's a new feature or if there's like some vulnerability that was identified and we'd recommend people to move over. Upgrading to the latest version should be fairly painless because there shouldn't be breaking changes. We in Microsoft just have a good habit of, I think we called Dependabot, where it'll just like automatically rev versions for us and we just do the reviews and check them in. So from like a good just like development perspective, we'd recommend staying on the latest as much as you can.
Cool. Thanks.
Actually, just want to add one thing to what Matthew said. One of the big pushes that we have at the moment is taking our experimental features and graduating them. And so you'll start to see that happening. So if you are using any experimental features, it would be good to move to the, like, things may change slightly between experimental and it being GA.
That's good to know. Thank you.
And then a really quick, what's it called? FYI for everyone. So if y'all haven't seen, there's been a bit of a shift in how the OpenAI SDKs are being developed for .NET. So there's now like an official one from OpenAI. The Azure OpenAI team is kind of revving and rebuilding theirs, and they're going to be releasing a 2.0 version of that. Because one SDK has now effectively split into two, and they look very different. We on the Semantic Kernel team are trying to identify how to actually make that transition. And because our underlying SDKs are changing so fundamentally, we do suspect there will be some breaking changes. We are going to be making it as simple as possible just got off a call. We suspect it's just like one-liner changes of like, oh, instead of calling it OpenAI, it's called Azure OpenAI or what have you, right? So just want to keep y'all aware that in probably like the next few weeks, the 2.0 versions of these SDKs will be landing, and Semantic Kernel will quickly follow with integrating it. Okay, cool. Tristan.
Yeah, what was the reason for splitting that? It seems like a pretty radical change for something that's, it's like it's separated with like environment variables and things like that in a lot of situations. It doesn't. Is there something more to it?
The feedback that we were getting from customers as Microsoft was, oh wow, there's a really cool feature that OpenAI just shipped. When can I use it? And the Azure team was like, oh, we still have to like build and work on it, right? And so it would be several weeks out before it was actually in the Azure OpenAI SDK, and that customers could use it, right? And so to make it easier, faster for folks to use the latest and greatest from OpenAI, OpenAI itself has invested in and spun up their own SDK that will be kind of more up to date with kind of everything that comes out from their groups. And so that's why there was that first push. And then on the Azure OpenAI side, we're using this as an opportunity to basically lock down a lot of the APIs. A lot of it's been in preview. We believe once they land 2.0, it'll be in a stable, non-breaking state, which is great for us on Semantic Kernel. We will have two really great stable SDKs that we can build on top of.
And so the if I'm understanding right, they've basically forked the main branch and they add in some advanced capabilities in their branch, or are they actually two totally parallel branches from here?
That I don't know. Mark, do you have to know?
Yeah. So I'll put links into the chat, but there's an OpenAI project, completely separate OpenAI project now that's in the OpenAI organization, and there's an SDK released that supports OpenAI functionality, and it should be updated so that day one, as they introduce new features, it'll appear in that SDK the way they're updating their Python SDK. And then the Azure AI OpenAI package is built on top of that, takes that as a dependency. And because they've started taking that as a dependency, there's some API changes, and they've gone from 1.x versions to 2.x versions.
And so they including .NET in
that? Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Look forward to the link. It's interesting.
Yeah. You can see, if you follow the link, you can follow the link to the repository, and you can see all the source code and stuff like that. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, up there. Here, I'll go ahead and share my screen, pull it up. Oh, is this the link, Mark? Oh, and then we can go to search repository. So yeah, this is inside of OpenAI, and this is a .NET version. So you can take a look at that there. Cool.
Sorry, one last question. Is this Semantic Kernel still?
Oh, so this is the SDKs that Semantic Kernel takes a dependency on to talk to the OpenAI models. So this is, it's internal plumbing for basically for us, for you to take advantage of. But because the internal plumbing is changing so much, you may see some impact.
But is this repo just what SK depends on when it's using OpenAI as opposed to Azure OpenAI? Is that correct?
That will be the future. So today, over the last year, there used to be just one SDK for all of .NET for both OpenAI and Azure OpenAI. Just one. OpenAI is like, actually, we want to create our own that's always going to be like super, super, super up to date. So now there's two. And kind of to Tristan's question, like, oh, is it forks? Is it separate? Like, they're different things now. They're kind of like parallel. One takes a dependency on the other. From Semantic Kernel, because it started as one and now it's two. In the future, when you take a dependency on OpenAI services, you'll use the OpenAI SDK behind the scenes. You don't have to really know about that, but that's what will happen. And then if you're using Azure OpenAI services behind the scenes, you'll use the Azure OpenAI SDK.
So is there a corresponding repo like to the one you just shared for Azure OpenAI?
Yes, sure.
I would love that.
Yeah, Mark just shared the last link.
Okay,
The
perfect.
last link, Azure. Cool, thank you.
Perfect. I'm seeing a couple of hands. Arvind, do you want to go ahead?
Hi. So I had a quick question. So there's still some confusion between semantic kernel memory and the kernel memory library that's by Davis Lucado. And I often need from my applications to generate document embeddings on the fly and save it to the vector database. And I really like the kernel memory because it provides an entire pipeline with OCR. It can handle a bunch of different data formats. But is similar functionality going to arrive in semantic kernel memory? Because right now, if you
So,
follow the tutorials, you have to run this .NET tool separately. I mean, we want the capability to do it on the fly within the code.
yeah, really great question. I've seen this come up a couple of times around memory. Within semantic kernel, there are certain pieces of memory that will always live within that, or within the other repo that you're referring to with Davis, a lot of that is a lot more around research as well. And so a lot of that we see integrating in long term. But in terms of your very specific question of kind of integrating that in, Matthew would love if you don't mind elaborating a bit further on that as well.
Yeah, so the current memory abstractions that are in semantic kernel today are old. They basically haven't been changed since it first went live. That being said, we have active work ongoing as we speak, and I'm trying to pull up the ADR for it. Okay, got it. I want to paste it in the chat. Basically, what we've been doing is we want to make sure that there's non-experimental memory connectors so that you can easily do write operations and search operations for anything that you do in semantic kernel. We have been inspired by, of course, things like Davis's project, like kernel memory and other open source projects. And so I would say over the next few weeks / month, 2 months, you should start seeing us actually deliver these things, and that will be the fully supported version of memory from semantic kernel that you can deploy in production scenarios. As Sophia mentioned, kernel memory is more being treated as a research project today, and we're currently shopping it around within Microsoft to see if we can have that as a more fully supported enterprise solution. So hopefully that gives you some context. The one thing I will say that will still remain different between the two projects is what the kernel memory project does particularly well is doing this offline ingestion of like PDFs or documents or whatever it might be into a store. Because semantic kernel is more focused on that like agentic agent back and forth, that live real-time experience, we are not, at least today, investing in a lot of those ingestion scenarios. And so if that's something that you need and just a bunch of documents offline, kernel memory will continue to be that project that you might want to leverage. But if you do anything like real-time with agents, real-time memory, doing RAG, real-time for the customer, that's when you'll want to use the new memory abstractions that'll be coming out this summer.
Okay.
Perfect. Carl, do you want to go ahead with your question next?
Yes, thank you. So, quick background, we're working on an application using the .NET semantic kernel, and we're building like an assembly that uses a lot of those functionalities. So, what we're doing right now is a connector. So, first of all, do you have like any documentation that we can refer to help out in that for building custom connectors?
Real quick, you're building a custom connector to your own model, or help me.
Yeah. So our own internal service that then access models, yes.
And this service, is it like an AI model behind the scenes? Is it something else?
Yeah. So it's
And then-
basically chat completion services.
Got it. And behind the scenes, is it just talking to like an OpenAI model, or is it like a completely different interface?
No, it's using OpenAI, but we're expecting other interfaces in the future. So
Got it. So I guess my typical recommendation for folks is try to avoid building your own connector if you can help it, because you kind of just want to use our out of the box ones, and life is good. The OpenAI one that we have is pretty nice because you can just change the endpoint of it, and as long as that underlying service has the same API contract, it'll just kind of like magically work. We've actually seen a lot of services today, like they're not OpenAI like Hugging Face or LLM Studio. They just support the OpenAI API protocol so that you can use these connectors and SDKs to talk to it. So I guess what I would recommend first is try that. Try the OpenAI connector. Just change the endpoint to point to your new service, and it should just work. You said in the future you might be adding other services. Again, I would check, do those services behind the scenes support the OpenAI API? And if they do, it'll continue to work.
Okay.
If they, for some unfortunate reason, don't support that API interface, I'd say come back and we can have that conversation. But I have my fingers crossed for you that you won't even have to worry about it.
All right. Yeah, that sounds good. So my other quick question, like I noticed there's this internal utilities folder that contains a bunch of nice things like HTTP clients and stuff like that. However, all of those, like most of those, are internal classes that we can't access from other assemblies like we have. So is there a reason for that, or any plans to allow this access in the future, or any workarounds?
Mark, Ben, are y'all familiar with these?
Sorry, actually, I didn't catch the question. Sorry, do you mind repeating it?
Yeah, so like in the .NET code, there's this internal utilities folder containing a bunch of useful classes with like that are set as internal, which means that they can only be accessed from within the semantic kernel code. So, however, we're building a different assembly in C# that uses a lot of those functions, but we can't use them because they're not accessible from an external assembly. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we don't plan to make those public because we didn't really want to expose those as a part of our API surface and having people depend on them. And some of the stuff that we're marking as internal are things that will go away or will move to official packages in the future. I mean, if there's anything you need, you could just kind of copy it into your own project. I think that would be that's probably the best option. I can't see us kind of like making any of that this stuff public, right? Because it's just going to cause us problems in the future, you know. So.
All right. Yeah, that's what I figured. Thank you.
Yeah. So.
Perfect. Thanks, Carl. I see Logan, you have your hand up if you want to go next.
Yeah, so quickly for myself. So I want to use semantic kernel.net and Azure Container Apps Dynamic Sessions together. Do you have any resources on that at all? Especially on the .NET version of it.
Yes, I'm pulling up. There's a sample. I'm going to drop it in the chat.
Thank you.
Your hand gestures are confusing clearly, yes. So that should help you get started.
Thank you.
Perfect. And then Romero?
Is it my turn?
Yes.
Okay. So what I wanted to ask is, do we have any approach or maybe tools for prompt versioning when using semantic kernel?
Versioning. This is different than just versioning in Git. Yes.
Yes.
Might be helpful. Yeah, let's start with this scenario. What are you hoping to get out of prompt versioning that you don't get out of Git versioning?
I mean, I saw some frameworks or tools specifically that help with, seeing the changes and easier. I mean, I know it can be achieved with source control, but I saw some dedicated tools for that. And
so I guess this is where Matthew gets on his little soapbox. So what I have seen in the AI space is a lot of folks, frankly, reinventing the wheel. Because a lot of the folks that are doing this now, they're kind of like AI developers, like, oh, I need versioning, so I'm going to build like a new versioning tool and I'm going to ship it out there, right? All of you as enterprise app devs, though, have been doing things like versioning for years, if not decades, and like the golden standard at this point is Git and GitHub. And so we on Semantic Kernel team, because we are servicing enterprise app devs, we aren't going to necessarily fund kind of a forked or alternative way of versioning. Instead, we're going to encourage folks to say, hey, use the tools that you're already familiar with, use the tools that you're already proficient with, in this case, Git, right? And then, because you're using Git and always been using Git, you can use those tools that you already have today to do compare and contrast and version and changes and all of that stuff, right? And then the value of Semantic Kernel being inside of Microsoft is if you then come to us and say, hey, this really cool versioning tool has feature XYZ that for whatever crazy reason isn't inside of Git or inside of GitHub, we can then work with those teams to add that functionality. So the answer is no, but please file issues on us if there's functionality that you're not getting from Git that you are getting from some of these other tools, or you would like to see inside of Git.
Okay, so maybe one more thing. Do we have any examples or some proven good practices as to where to hold prompts, how to structure the project around that?
Yeah. So let me just go. So we have a few samples. I think if we have one that has a bunch of prompts inside of it. I want to share my screen. So if you kind of look at the samples or inside of demos within our samples, like our getting started folder, you can see there's like a resources folder and we just have like YAMLs inside of it, which are prompts. For .NET projects, either like calling it resources, I normally have a folder called like prompts. And you can just save these in there and then typically, yeah, here we go. And then you just like embed those resources into your project. So I'll go ahead and share this link, but that's kind of what I'd recommend for most applications.
Perfect.
Okay,
And then
thank you.
Gary, I see. Oh, sorry, go for Romeo. Anything else?
I just wanted to say thanks. That's all.
Absolutely. Love the question. Appreciate it. Someone in chat from Gary. Gary, I'd love to understand which language you're using for. You're wondering around the state of the standardized agent assistant APIs. Is there a specific language that you're focused on?
.NET.
.NET.
Okay, so we just finished prioritizing our backlog for agents. I want to pull that up. Share my screen. I'm actually also paste this in our chat. And in fact, we finished prioritizing everything in .NET and Python. We're going to wrap up this week. But if you follow the link I just shared with you, you should see a project that looks something like this. And we have all of the key elements of Semantic Kernel grouped in buckets. And this particular question is about agents. So let's go ahead and open up agents. Based on customer feedback that's been given to us on using the existing agent framework today, we've listed out a bunch of P0s that are necessary before the abstractions themselves become non-experimental. The ones I have heard in particular is how do you actually serialize and deserialize these things? How do you more easily bring in users, humans into the conversation? So if you kind of read through these items, you'll kind of get a sense of the current gaps that we have with our agent framework. And over the next month or so, we expect to close them. And I think I just saw in the chat agent streaming. That's number 8 right here, add streaming to the agent framework. This is prioritized in the order that we expect to complete them. So if there's something like, oh man, I really need this now, leave comments in those issues to help us further refine the prioritization. And probably even most importantly, if there's any issues or challenges that you're running into that are not on this list anywhere, please go ahead and create those issues, and then we'll triage them and make sure that they fall at the right stack rank.
Just curious, do you have an overall design doc that kind of goes through the thinking of how you're going to put this together, or is it all just in these individual work items?
So we have a ADR that's currently being worked on. Let's see.
Just to get like a larger overview of how it's, because I don't keep track of this like on a day-to-day basis. I'm waiting for this stuff to drop before I invest a huge amount of time.
Oh yeah. So this one was closed. Do we know if Chris has a more up-to-date ADR? Let's just see.
Yeah, Chris did update the ADR this week.
Here it is.
I'm not sure if it's merged yet, but it should be on the way.
That's open. Okay, so I want to drop a link to this. So ADR is architectural design. What's the R for? What's it review?
Or architectural decision record.
Okay, architectural decision record. Okay. So it's our way of basically saying this is how things will work. If you go into here and go into docs and decisions and view this file, this basically walks through the design that we've created for our agent framework, the core abstractions that have been created. So if you're looking for a single place to kind of just get started with understanding what we're doing and why, this is a great document. And then if you want some more hands-on, how does this stuff actually work in practice? We do have a set of getting started samples. So we have a folder in here called Getting Started with Agents that you can take a look at as well.
So you guys are looking to land this abstractions when?
When
you're looking at...
Yeah, so we are going to be publishing our summer roadmap and plans next week. We plan on having most of it kind of locked down by the end of the summer. We will probably do it in phased approaches. So we have some first-party teams that don't even need multiple agents to talk to each other. They're like, Matthew, we have a single agent, and we just need to ship this thing to production, and we don't want any experimental features. So I would expect, or what you should expect for us to do is ship a completed version of like, this is what an agent is, and as a follow-up, oh, now these agents can collaborate within a group chat. We won't make these things non-experimental until at least those P0s in that backlog I shared with you have been completed.
And just for clarity, agents and assistants, are they the same thing, or are they different concepts?
Great question. So agent, I kind of treat as this like top level abstraction or category, and then it can be implemented in a bunch of different ways. Using the assistance API is one way of implementing an agent. At least that's how I keep it straight in my head. Great question.
Perfect. And then chat, Arvind, I saw your
Thanks.
question. Would you mind coming off mute?
Sure. So assuming we have a large investment in already an existing Azure AI Search Classic index, right? No RAG, etc. And we've had skills in there to do the OCR for handwritten documents, etc. But is there a way to leverage that investment and maybe like check a box and say, all right, we want to opt into this RAG world, and so that the net result of that effort, where you already have the content already extracted in the index, be transfer, be embedded, such that the result is compatible with SK memory abstraction?
So this is great. I can get on another soapbox. So what I tell customers all the time when they start starting AI and RAG is, don't throw everything away that you have and start just like building your own vector DB and memory and all this stuff. And it sounds like that's what you're trying to do. You have stuff that already exists that has data, and you want to reuse it in something like semantic kernel, right? If you think about what RAG is at its heart, it's retrieving information. So you can imagine you have this like classic version of Azure AI Search that you can retrieve information for. You can augment a prompt so that the AI can generate a correct response. In that world, you don't need to use our memory abstractions, or frankly, anyone's memory abstractions. All you really have to do is create a plugin that you give to your AI, give to your agent, so that it can make requests, make searches on your existing apps and services. Okay. So my recommendation for you on kind of your first next steps is go ahead and create a kernel, create a plugin, and all it does is has a single method called search. It takes in a query, and it makes a request to whatever you've built today, and that will return information back to the agent so that it can answer the user's question. And you can do this all without having to move to new versions of Azure AI Search or trying to build out like memory connections or vector DBs. You can just use what you have today, just build a new plugin.
Okay.
Perfect. Jeffrey, do you want to come up with me? I saw your question in chat.
Yeah, so we have different teams that are doing AI projects and use some different tools. There's been some interest in using like being able to do orchestration in kind of a graph format, like LangGraph. So I know that there's prompt flow, but it's not really clear how to work with semantic kernel and C# with prompt flow. So I'm kind of interested if there's other graph approaches to agent orchestration that work with semantic kernel or other research projects within Microsoft.
Yeah, this is probably the biggest gap that I'm aware of in semantic kernel today. So when we release our kind of plans for the summer next week, there's a whole pillar where how to do graph-based orchestration for single and multi-agents. So get excited for that. The other question you have was like, what else in Microsoft is there to kind of do the same thing? Prompt flow, I don't think actually is a good solution for this because those flows are pretty unidirectional. You start at the top and you kind of go all the way down. Whereas things like LangGraph or Crew AI, you can have like loops and you can go back, and it's kind of like a finite state machine. The best thing that we have within Microsoft today is AutoGen. They have a way of multiple agents to talk and collaborate with each other using a graph-based approach. So check that out if you're interested in. In terms of semantic kernel, as a preview of what we're going to be sharing next week, is we're going to be looking at and being inspired by projects like LangGraph, like Crew AI, like AutoGen, and building our own kind of graph orchestration framework for semantic kernel. So if there are particular features or requirements that you really like, create issues on us, discussions, we'll use that as we create our requirements.
Perfect. I know we only have a couple minutes left and not seeing more questions in chat. Does anyone else have any final questions to close out today's office hours with? Romeo.
Yes, one more question. I'm using Azure OpenAI, and I've been using get streaming chat message contents async method, and I couldn't access the number of tokens used. I saw that OpenAI didn't return the usage of tokens when using streaming, but that changed. later I found some resource that said that Azure OpenAI simply does not return this information. And my question is, did it maybe change, or is it entirely on the Azure OpenAI side and Semantic Kernel cannot do anything about that? Or maybe it's already introduced and I just don't know about it.
So I know a month ago, I made a huge fuss on the Azure OpenAI team because I was like, "You're not sending us this information. Our customers hate us." They said they were getting it fixed. It's been long enough that I thought it would have been fixed already. Ben, do you know if that ever got fixed and Tao was able to take it, or are we still waiting? Or Roger, it looks like you might know.
Yeah, I can jump really quick. So currently the OpenAI for streaming, they don't provide the tokens, right? That was my first question when I was one of the implementers of that method, by the way. And they don't provide that still. I'm just made a request here with my postman against OpenAI in a streaming scenario, and I didn't get any token information. The information that I get mostly is that for each of the chunks that you get back from OpenAI, it is technically a token. So you could count those chunks and use them as tokens for your site, but that's not very specific, but it's the closest that you can get for the moment, right?
I know I saw this method that people are using that, but I am also quite sure that I found on the OpenAI forum that they added this feature where they return the information about the usage in the last chunk, only in the last chunk.
Yeah, I'm checking the last chunk, by the way. Yeah, it's not here.
Yeah, so OpenAI does this. Azure OpenAI has historically not done this. This is one of the reasons why OpenAI has created their own SDK, to harken back to a previous conversation that we had, so that some of these deltas were not an issue for folks using OpenAI. But my understanding is the Azure OpenAI team is aware of this deficiency and they've been working on it. You have reminded me to go check up on them to see if they've actually made any progress.
Oh, okay. Thanks for making that clear.
Perfect. And with that, we'll go and close out office hours. Thanks everyone for joining in today. We really appreciate your time. There are a couple of surveys, the one linked earlier above, and then there's also the blog post with the Spire and Semantic Kernel that we'd love your feedback and participation on. So just want to thank all of you for engaging in the office hour session, and from the Semantic Kernel team for everyone joining and helping diving through all of our questions.
Here's y'all. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks all.